If laughter is the best medicine, then you'll want to come to a special event in just a few weeks. Hi, I'm Stephen Jiwanmal. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm your host for the Aevidum podcast. Aevidum is a nonprofit that empowers students to shatter the silence around mental health and suicide. In this episode, we talk to Chris Nee, a comedian who's bringing the laughs while breaking the stigma around mental health. Chris is open about how comedy kept him going through tough times. Here's our conversation. So, Chris, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know you've got this exciting show coming up in a few weeks. But before we get to that, can you just share a little bit of your story?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. So my story started back actually when I was 4 years old. I am a cancer survivor, so I battled ALL leukemia cancer from age 4 to 8. Thankfully, cancer-free for 20 plus years now, thank God. But with cancer and the traumas that I had as a kid going through that, it led obviously to some mental health issues. So in my teen years and up till now, I battle generalized anxiety and panic disorder on a daily basis. Thankfully, I'm way better now and have a better hold of it now than I have back when I was, 16, 17 years old, struggling to get through high school. But yeah, every negative that I had in my life, I basically try to figure out how I turn it into a positive. So being a cancer survivor, that's kind of where it started. When I was in the hospital for weeks on end, the only thing that really brought me joy was comedy, stand-up comedy and entertainment. And I always just was so like obsessed with it. And I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like this is what I want to do. And that was kind of like my strength, was to be like, hey, I'm going to beat cancer and then I'm going to start being a comedian and doing this. And I'm going to be the face for kids suffering cancer to show them that they could do whatever they want in this world. My hopes was still one day maybe be a Make-A-Wish for a kid. That would be amazing. Maybe we'll get there. Um, yeah, so with being a cancer survivor and getting that thrill of wanting to get into entertainment, I have an older brother, Tommy. He's 2 years older than me. We actually successfully ran a nonprofit organization for 10 plus years, called Healing Hats and Toys. And we had different events throughout the year, like designer bag bingos and beef and beers. And we actually, all the money that we made got donated to buying brand new hats and toys for kids suffering from cancer and other life-threatening illnesses. So around Christmas, we would visit a lot of hospitals, Children's Hospital, where actually that's where I spent the majority of my childhood, and just different hospitals around the Philadelphia area. And then I started doing comedy at 17. I did my first open mic. 33 now, so I've been doing it for a long time. But again, I figured, how do I take my gifts and help others? And that's where I came up with the Comedy to Break the Stigma show, which is what we're here to promote. That's coming up in June.
Yeah, well, first, I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and finding a way to get through something as traumatic as what you've been through comedy. It sounds like um, you were starting your comedy career around the time of high school, perhaps,
Yeah.
and you were talking about how you who had went through some pretty serious mental health challenges, kind of leading up to that. And what Avidum does is, they go into these schools and places where teens and young children are, to provide support. So I guess my next question for you is, when you were a teenager, when you were going through those things and having that generalized depression, what did it feel like, and what was the turning point for you?
It it was honestly horrible. It was really bad. I just had so I have generalized anxiety and panic disorder. So generalized anxiety is basically you worry about literally every single thing, every waking moment of every single day. And when you hold things in for long enough and it builds up so much anxiety inside of you, it ultimately leads to hyperventilating and getting a full-on panic attack, which literally when you have a panic attack, it feels like you're going to die. It literally feels like you're having a heart attack. So when I had my first panic attack, I was so scared. I remember I woke up in the middle of the night. I ran into my parents' room, especially with my medical history. I'm like, man, something isn't right. And I was petrified. I really thought that I was having a heart attack. And I'm like, I'm 16 years old. Like, why would I have a heart attack? Um, so, and then I talked to my parents, they calmed me down and all of that. Um, but going through high school was rough, just because I'm not really, I'm like a dreamer and I always like putting my efforts into like what I really enjoy, and school just wasn't that. I just really hated that I had to be somewhere for a certain amount of days learning about all these topics that probably won't benefit me in my life. I'd rather do other things. So that's why I started to start chasing my dreams in high school and start doing comedy open mics at 17. But going through the high school days, I just felt like I was in a daze, honestly. And I feel like I was so wrapped up in my future and like thinking about what's the next thing. The best way that I could really describe it is I'm constantly worrying about the next chapter of my life without realizing like what I'm living in is what I used to think about. And that would just drive me bananas. So I just had thoughts all day long, just like I couldn't focus. And it's just, I kind of just felt like I was going through the motions. And it really, I mean, I still had a good teenage life. I had really good friends. I still have some of my best friends since kindergarten. But it's kind of weird because in high school you're so vulnerable because you want to be the cool guy, or you want to go on dates, or you want to be the star of like a basketball. You want that something that like solidifies you. And my anxiety stopped me from doing a lot of things. Like it stopped me from asking that girl out, or whenever I would go to like a function or hang out with friends, like I always just had to think of an escape plan. Because like if I was feeling anxious or just feeling like worried and not myself, like how can I get out? So it made for a really weird experience. But looking back on it now, I wouldn't change it because of how my life is now. Um, and it got really bad, and my anxiety and my panic disorder was just horrible in high school. It really was. Like I had like insomnia, so I was up really late on the weekends, and then I was like sleeping, literally wasting my day. Like I was sleeping into 2, 3 o'clock on Saturday, just feeling so unmotivated and unfulfilled. And my my dad just was like, hey, my dad always told me when it starts affecting your life, that's when you have to do something about it. And my mother has generalized anxiety and panic disorder as well. And so when I was 17, that's when I went to therapy for the first time to help me out.
What you're describing, I know that a lot of our listeners will immediately feel you.
Yeah.
I think that the students that we've had the pleasure of talking to have described anxiety and depression in the ways that you have. And some of them had strong support systems around them, and other people didn't. And I wanted to ask you about dealing with that as a man, dealing with that as a young man, and the stigma that's often attached to mental health when it comes to men. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel it's important for boys and young men to talk about anxiety and depression like you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think I really hate it. Just like a man, what is a man? What is a woman? At the end of the day, we're all human, regardless of gender. And we all are allowed to feel exactly the way that we're supposed to feel without feeling any neglect or regret about it. But I feel like, it's a generational thing where, your parents or your grandparents growing up, it's like you're a man, you have to do this job, you have to be the supporter, you got to be that tough guy. Like you don't cry, you don't show emotion, just chin up, man up, and go about your business. Thankfully, I think we're at a good place where there's a lot of mental health awareness now. So I feel like um, parents are more understanding of what's going on, which I feel is amazing. Thankfully, and I can only talk from my perspective, but with my mom who suffers from generalized anxiety and panic disorder, my dad already understood it. He doesn't, he doesn't have it, but he understands it. So I just really feel like my parents and my older brother, my brother doesn't, suffer from it either, but they understood it. And that's really what everybody I think needs is they need to be open about how they are struggling, and they need to, even if you have one person that supports you and understands it, you just need one person. And I talk about that in my book. I have a chapter called Essential Lifelines. And I talk about how I'm very fortunate where I have like six of my best friends who are still my best friends to this day. And we know each other since kindergarten. Um, and even though they didn't go through what I went through, I had that support. So I had that if I was feeling weird, I know I could hop on a FaceTime or text one of my buddies, or my parents, and they were good at helping me get out of my own way, which is nice. So, me and my friends will play like video games. And so we'll just be like, hey, why don't you hop on? We'll play some games, we'll talk and like get your mind off of everything. Or, you know, God, I had countless hours that I would just be sitting in my parents' bedroom with them and just like talking about how stressed out I am and how I don't understand life and like what is going on. But being a man and speaking about mental health, that's why I'm trying so hard to change the stigma. That's why I'm trying to break the stigma about this, because the when you deal with a mental health issue, whether it's depression or anxiety or panic disorder, you feel so alone, and you really just feel like you're weird or you're an outcast, but it's because you're not open about it. If you are open about it to people, you'll realize how normal and not alone you really are. Statistically, if you're at a party and there's 10 people there, 3 out of 10 people had some sort of mental health issue, and nobody would know because you don't want to be the guy at the party feeling anxious and being like, hey, you anybody here anxious or have any issues? But I mean, if you were a little open about it, there might be some person there who's just as socially awkward or anxious as you are to make you feel better. Um, and from the start, I always was open. I don't care about my gender. I don't care about my race or age. Like, if I was struggling, I was struggling, and I let people know that I was. And I think that helped me in the long run. But um, it starts with being open about yourself and having that even one person that you can talk to, an essential lifeline.
Chris, I really appreciate how you broke down that for us. I think that, as a fellow guy, I think I always worried about that too. But realizing that mental health is mental health, no matter, who you are. But I'm wondering how you've been able to take those experiences that you've shared and through comedy create the show that's coming to the Lehigh Valley in a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about the show?
Yeah, so my comedy style is like storytelling. So like you really get to know who I am as a person through like my comedy and my jokes. And I've talked about having panic disorder. I talked about having anxiety, and all these things like in my comedy sets. And I would do shows, and then afterwards, some audience members will come up to me and be like, "Do you really have panic disorder and anxiety?" And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, then how are you doing that? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, if you're anxious, the last thing that you should even think about doing is going up on stage in front of people you don't know and trying to make them laugh. That's like the most vulnerable anybody can be, is comedy. And I think that's what drew me to the art of stand-up comedy, is because it's just me, one microphone, one stage. Like, there's no band, there's no whatever to support you. And like I said, I was always open about my struggles, and I do that on stage as well. So I talk about what I'm going through. And I think being that vulnerable or in talking about those topics via comedy, it has impacted people, and shows it's more of like a motivating thing, because it shows people like, man, like I am suffering, but that doesn't mean that like I can't chase what I want to do. And that's been my whole purpose this entire time, is just being so open about everything. And I've had, like I said, I've had members come up to me and they're like, man, I deal with panic attacks. Like, how do you deal with it? Or I have so much anxiety on a daily basis. Like, how are you doing? Like, what you're doing? And I think when you're a comedian, the best route to go is to be as real as possible. People are going to sniff you out if you're going up there and trying to be fake and trying to put on an act per se. Um, and I always just thought being as real as possible, doing this is going to help people and hopefully motivate people to do what they want to do in life. And that's just always my driving factor doing comedy, is like, I know what I'm doing is making a difference and helping people. And that's why I wanted to start the Comedy to Break the Stigma show, because mental health is such an important part of my life and has made me into the man that I am today. And it's kind of my way of giving back, because laughter is the best medicine. And if I could do a show in front of hundreds of people, and one person in that crowd could have maybe had a panic attack before they got to that show, or maybe has social anxiety and they're in this crowd of 400, 500 people. But once the comics come on stage and they start telling jokes and he starts laughing and forgetting about his struggles, or she is forgetting about her struggles in that moment, that is why I wanted to do these shows, because I've been there. I've been on the opposite side. And it's funny because man, like maybe 5 years ago, I had a pretty big show in Philadelphia, and I was headlining it, and I had a panic attack before I went up, and I had like a couple minutes to get straight. And so I was just like trying to do breathing exercises, and I have a picture of it. It's actually in my book. And I'm like literally leaning up against the wall, and like I'm just trying to breathe right. But once my name was called and once the audience started clapping, everything just went away. Um, so the whole point of Comedy to Break the Stigma is to help others, and help all these mental health organizations. But I mean, there's going to be a no better event than a comedy show for mental health, because regardless if you're depressed or if you're happy or whatever you're going through, for an hour or 2 hours of that show, you're going to be so present and laugh the entire time that for a little moment of time, you're not going to have those worries, you're not going to have those struggles or anxiety or depression. And that's what the whole point of the Comedy to Break the Stigma was.
I think we're basically done because you answered all the questions I had. But is there anything else that you wanted to add, including like how to get tickets or when things are going to happen, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the show is going to be Saturday, June 1st at the Civic Theater in Allentown. It is going to be a 21 and older show. So you could actually just there's an event page on Facebook. You could just search Chris Nee's Comedy to Break the Stigma on Facebook. You could go on the app When Now, and you could just type in Comedy to Break the Stigma, and that'll bring you to the links for the show as well. But the show is going to be great. Like I said, I'm teaming up with Aevidum, which is awesome, and I really think that this is going to be something really special, and I'm really excited about it. The comedians that I have are top notch. They're they're probably the funniest comics in Philadelphia. And I even have a comic coming from New York who's going to hop on the show. And yeah, tickets are $35. And like I said, the ticket sales, they'll be donated to Aevidum. And but there's also going to be other stuff there. I'm going to be selling my book there. I'm also going to be launching a new merchandise line. It's called Normalize Anxiety. And I'm going to have t-shirts and hats there. And that show is going to be the first launch for that. So I'm really excited about that. And that's another thing that I'm really excited about because, again, that's going to help break the stigma. And I came up with a very cool logo and a design where I feel like people in high school and college are really going to dig it. And I think it's going to help people be more open about their mental health, which is my main goal with that as well. So, but yeah, it's Saturday, June 1st. Doors open at 7, show starts at 8. I have 8 of the best comics around, and it's going to be a great night. I'm very excited about it.
I'm very excited about it too. I've got my ticket and I am excited
Oh,
to go see it. And thank you once again for thinking of Avidum and the work that we do as an organization. And I certainly hope that people show up to come for a good time, to laugh, but also to reflect on mental health. So, Chris, thank you so much for your time.
absolutely.
In our next episode, we'll hear about how sports and exercise impact mental health. As always, thank you for listening to the Aevidum podcast. Special thanks to WellSpan for their support and to ND Sites for editing. You can follow Aevidum on Instagram at Aevidum. That's AEVIDUM. And you can learn more about what we do at aevidum.org. I'm Stephen Jewenmaw, and I've got your back.